Hey there. If you're new here, welcome to teachToLearn, the channel in which I teach concepts so you can learn them and I can better understand them. If you're already part of the family, then welcome back. Right now we're going to be learning how to write concise object literal declarations using object property shorthand. This is part of the ES6 module from the JavaScript algorithms and data structures course from FreeCodeCamp. So they start off by telling us that ES6 adds some nice support for easily defining object literals. And then we're told to consider the following code in which a function, so an arrow function, this function right here, has been declared with the const keyword and has been set to receive two parameters, so two arguments, and it has two parameters, one for x and one for y. And what our function is set to do, it is set to return an object with two properties, so x and y, and these properties values are directly related to the arguments that we pass into our function. So with this function right here, we would get, an object with two properties. And for x, that property would be the value that we passed in for x. And for y, that property's value would be the value that we passed in for y in our function. So then they're telling us that getMousePosition is a simple function that returns an object containing two properties. ES6 provides the syntactic trigger to eliminate the redundancy of having to write x, so the property of x, with the value for x. You can simply write x once and it will be converted to x containing a value, or something equivalent under the hood. Here is the same function from above rewritten to use this new syntax. So we have our function getMousePosition once again, and it has been set to return an object, so this right here, with two properties, and those properties are directly related to the values that we pass in for x and y. So let's see that code in action real quick to further clarify what this function is doing. So we have our function right here, and let's set a new variable called techtObj. And our variable's contents will be the following. So we assign to it our getMousePosition function, and the arguments that we will be passing on to our function are the following. So let's just say that our position at x is, just give a random number, 17, and y is 20. Now, when we go into the console and log in our new variable called techtObj, so techtObj, we will see that we get an object. So we are returned an object right here with two properties, so x and y, as we talked about before. And each of our properties values are the values that we passed into our function as arguments. So 17 for x, our property x inside of our object contains a number value of 17. And for y, that number is 20. So this is what this code right here, the getMousePosition function, does. Now that that's out of the way, let's reset all of our code, and let's move on to our challenge. So we are tasked with using the object property shorthand with object literals to create and return an object with name, age, and gender properties. So before we do anything, in our code editor right here, we have a function, so an arrow function called createPerson, and this function takes in three arguments. So it currently has three parameters, one called name, one called age, and one called gender. So this function must be passed into it a value for name, age, and gender. And then our function is set to return within this block of code right here an object with the name, age, and gender properties, and with the values that we will be submitting into our function. So it would return a name property with the name that we pass into our function, and so forth for each property. We don't want this code to be like this. Instead, we want to use the object property shorthand to shorten this right here, make it more concise and a little bit easier to read. So let's just move on to doing that. We can go ahead and get rid of these comments and this code right here. So You can also delete this. So the first thing we do in order to edit this function is open our parentheses. And right after we do that, we need to open our set of curly braces and simply type in the names of the properties that we wish our object contain. So we have name, we have age, and we have gender. So our function is now done. Let's just test it real quick. So let's declare a new variable, and let's call it test obj once again. And our value, so what our test obj variable will be assigned, is our createPerson function. So createPerson function, and the values that we will be passing into this function are, so for name, let's just call this person Charlie. For age, let's say that he's 21, and gender, let's say that he is a male, which shouldn't really be a surprise considering his name. So let's just log this variable into the console. So console log test obj. And as you can see right here, we get our object with our name, age, and gender properties. And each of the properties contains the value that we passed into our function for that property. So we get a property called name, and its contents is Charlie. Then for age contains a number value 21, and gender contains a string of M, which represents that person is a male. So let's run the test and see if we have completed this challenge. And as you can see, we have. So this has been it for this lesson, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a nice one.